So hypermedia is I suppose you could say, language or method that allows us to represent data in a way more suitable to how we as humans would actually interpret data ourselves. So if, for example, you think about like a piece of information or a piece of knowledge contained in something like a journal article or a book, it's going to be organized, there's a very concrete, very set structure. So a journal article, you might start with an abstract, or sorry, a title, then you've got an abstract, then you have an introduction, then you have some background, methods, it's split up, and it follows a very linear structure. So linear is a key thing here. So with hypermedia, however, when we interpret information, we tend to not really follow it through in such a linear fashion. We tend to try and associate different bits together and try and provide a much more complex structure. Hypermedia is designed to try and allow us to facilitate this kind of structure, or to enable us to represent information in such a way that it maps these conceptual associations, or allows us to have a much better idea of the semantic structure of data rather than just the raw information. So, for example, you might think of something like Wikipedia as compared to, say, a book or something like that. It's comparatively very unstructured. You have, for a given Wikipedia article, there will be links out to other related articles from those. There will be links. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the idea. I know I find myself doing it very easily. You open up a Wikipedia page on something, and then 3 hours later, you've gone through about 50 Wikipedia pages, and you're just on a completely different topic. Very, very easy, but it's interesting to see how the different how data can be structured in that way, how there can be very few steps between seemingly distant data. But that kind of mimics the way we do actually view and understand knowledge. Is we consider it more sort of by association rather than structuring it in any sort of linear format. And hypermedia also, as an extension on, I suppose you could sort of say, hypertext. We're talking about media here, so this is really many different types of media, not just text. We could be talking about image, we could be talking about sound, we could be talking about lots of different types of content in media. So yeah, as I sort of mentioned there, it's about trying to store information in a non-linear, associative manner, which better mimics the way in which we consider data. So yeah, it's a few notes there on the foundations of hypermedia, but Theodore Nelson coined the words hypertext and hypermedia, but you can trace it back a bit further to Bush, to Memex. So I've got here also a piece of, let's call this a document. So there's a couple of things on this document. You can see them there. And let's put up another document. So I'm going to stop now. I'm just going to ask people to have a look at this for a second. So on the left-hand side, we've got one document. On the right-hand side, we've got the second. Can anyone tell me what the difference between the two is? Or some differences between the two? Can anyone make some suggestions? Font size, yep. Yeah, they're different font size. Yep, so the heading's done differently. It's got one heading has a pink rectangle around it. Some others, the left-hand side, the list is numbered from 1 to 4. On the right-hand side, it's just a bullet point list. There's no order. Or there's an order, rather, it's not numbered. But the key thing here is that the actual content, the structure of the content, is identical in both cases. All that they really differ in is how we have elected to display that structure data. We still have, in both cases, a heading which appears to sit above the entire document. We still have a subheading, and the same subheading. We then still have a Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry, didn't want to cough into the microphone. We still have a paragraph of text, and below that we still have a list. We have just elected to display this structured list very differently. So that's, I suppose, a large part of what hypermedia is about. And actually, when we move on into the HTML, CSS, and a number of different web technologies, that's one of the key things, is that we want to separate this idea of content and structure. So what is the information that we have? How is it structured? How do different elements relate to other elements in our full set of data? And how we should actually go about displaying that data. So we want to keep those two components completely separate. And yeah, so essentially it allows us then to have a much, it's both easier to manage, and it's also, I suppose, better in some respects, that we can then have a better track of, well, the structure of our data, which is in many cases information and important knowledge in itself. So SGML is a standard generalized markup language. So it's an ISO standard for describing information embedded within a document. So it's XML based. But essentially what it does is, there's no particular formatting. Like, it doesn't specify formatting for data. It essentially just gives you a set of rules that you can use to tag different elements of data. So let's go back to our document here. You might have the string or the text becoming rich, then another section of text, Bill Gates, then that paragraph, then each of those individual list points. Well, with XGML, what we do is SGML specifies a method for tagging different sentences, or each of those different strings, as for tagging those strings with respect to how they are related to other elements in your document. So we would say tag the title becoming rich. We would tag that string as the title for the document. We would tag the string Bill Gates as the subtitle or the author, or whichever way you want to interpret that. But yes, the key idea here is that we need to separate the content from the way that it is displayed. And that's something that I'm going to keep repeating over the next week or two, particularly going through CSS. So as an example, we've got here a small document with Cave, Caroline, and Don't Make Lemonade. So there are a number of different ways we could tag this. So the example that I'm using here, I know, okay, it is about your tagging with respect to how it displays, but I just want to use this as an example for how you tag, example of how tagging works. It's a little more visual, I suppose. So what we could do is we could have Caroline, we could tag it as it should be bolded. The text Cave should be italicized, and then we will underline the string Don't Make Lemonade. So that so a tag in this case is a name, so a word or a phrase saying what the tag is, so the attribute or the property that we are ascribing to the tagged content. We then place those in these brackets, so less than, greater than symbols. And then we have, for every tag, we have a corresponding close tag. So when we have this sort of opening tag section, that indicates that content after this is to be given the property that corresponds to this tag. And then when we see a close tag, so a close tag is where you, after the start of the tag, but before the name of the tag, just put a /. That says that everything before this or section of content, go back to the last time we found that tag, and we're going to stop giving that property to future content. So then we have this content. Let's say you gave that to a browser or to or you could then interpret it like so. So you could see that the string Caroline, we can see that we want to bold that. cave, we want to italicize it, and don't make lemonade, we want to underline. That's one way to do things. So I mentioned before that there's sort of you want to separate content and presentation, and okay, the easy to see if you know that you want to bold, let's say you've got two people, so involved in whatever kind of semantic relationship. One of them you're going to bold, one of them you're going to underline, so presumably depending upon their role in said semantic relationship. And then you've got a message or a related string of some sort that you want to underline, again, given that it is the message or the additional string that is linked to the two participants in the relationship. So we can, instead of tagging these strings with how we want that data to be displayed, we can instead kind of separate the process, tag the two of the strings as having whatever role in said semantic relationship that we know about, and tag the additional string as the message, and then allow, once we go to render that, we can then define a separate set of rules for how those different elements of those relationships and the message should be rendered. So in that case, another way to tag Caroline, Dave, and Cave and Don't Make Lemonade is, so we will tag Caroline as a recipient, Cave as a sender, and Don't Make Lemonade as a message. So in this case, we now actually know, if we then specify that a recipient should be underlined, a sender should be italicized, and a message should be underlined. If we encode that somewhere else, we still know how to render this. However, we also have additional information. We now know about the structure of the data, and should we decide to change one or both, it's much easier to do so because we've kind of separated the two areas. So we've separated the method we use to define the structure of any given data, and we've from the method we use to specify how structured data should be rendered or displayed. Yes, so you want to keep separate the formatting, so just how data should look, and semantics, so how the content is actually structured, and then you could define rules that allow you to work out how you should take this and render it. And that's actually what we'll cover with CSS, so using HTML and CSS as an example. HTML is the markup language that you use to define the structure of your documents for your web browser or for a HTML page, and CSS is what you use to tell the browser how to make things, how everything should look. So here we've got a simple example of an SGML file. So we've got my name, Henry Peterson, tagging HTML, content and presentation, and then some other text. And you can see here that we've actually got, let's get a pen. So we can see here everything is surrounded by a book tag. So what we're saying here is that all content enclosed in these two book tags is related to a single entity of type book. So that's grouping all of this content as being related to a single book. A way in which you could reinterpret that too is if you think about this as SGML, you could encode or you could enclose all of that in like email tags, saying that you have a single email, but that email contains a sender, a recipient, and a message. So while those three lines we're tagging them as different types of data, they are still related under the banner of a single email entity. Well, that's what we're doing here by saying everything is enclosed under book. We then have author. So only this string, Henry Peterson, relates to that single book as an author. So we enclose that string with the author tags. And then we have various other tags. So then we've got, for example, a chapter down here. We enclose everything. We see a chapter tag here. Everything up until we see a closed chapter tag, we're going to say is all that content is semantically related or grouped under the banner of being an individual chapter. And then even under that, we have individual sections. So what I would like to highlight here is that SGML is hierarchical. So you can have a hierarchy of attributes or of properties, and you can actually represent this fairly comfortably as like a tree, a kind of tree structure. And when you're doing, so when you do some sample HTML or some HTML exercises in your labs, you'll be using ideally you'll be using like a programming editor like say Notepad++. If you use Notepad++, you'll actually see that it allows you to expand and collapse individual sections of code. So for instance, you might have, if you type this out into Notepad++, it would recognize that you've got tag data, and then say to the left of this chapter you'd click something and it would just sort of collapse that. So that can be also something that you can use to have a play around with and get a sense of exactly how this data is organized hierarchically. So HTML is a subset of SGML, which is also used as the specific standard for publishing on the World Wide Web. So whenever you open a page in a browser, that's going to the data that you're seeing or the content, you're viewing a page that's been written in HTML. So yeah, HTML is the coding language used to create documents for the web. Essentially, much like SGML, you have your content. So you place your content onto your HTML document, and then you use HTML tags to tell the browser how this content should be structured. What does it all mean? How does it relate together? And then you just leave it up to the browser to work out how different things should actually look. So if you tell a browser that, okay, this is the page's title, this is a heading, this is just some text, then you let the browser decide how that should all look. And if you don't like the browser defaults, that's where CSS comes in. So yeah, that HTML is essentially about trying to tag the content in your page and tell the browser how it should be structured. So yeah, it's you can then, as well as just having text, you can tag things as being, say, the location of an image, the location of a resource somewhere else on the web that you should link to. So you can tag things as lots of different, or with lots of different properties. And then, yeah, HTML files are designed to be read in a browser. So essentially, the files that your browser loads and views should be read. If you write a file in HTML, you can then load it and view it in a browser. And the browser can interpret that and give you a sort of graphical representation rather than just, say, if you open an HTML file in a text editor. So the key concept in HTML documents is that of tags. So much like I showed with SGML before, the core concept here is that you have your content in your page, and then you want to set a hierarchical or create a hierarchical set of tags that provide or give structure to your content. So tags are typically words enclosed in angle brackets, and they must come in pairs. So for example, if you want to tag something as title, you would do so like this. So by the way, whereas with, say, like just generic XML, you could define your own tags. So HTML is a defined subset of tags. So my title doesn't have meaning. Title does. So for instance, it defines a list of tags that you can use to tell the browser how something should look. So one of those tags is title. Title defines the title of a page. A key thing to note is that tag names are not case sensitive. So you could, for example, have title in uppercase, title in lowercase. That's fine. I personally think it looks a lot nicer if you just use all lowercase. But the key thing here is that you're consistent. Whatever method you decide to go with, that's fine. Just be consistent. The primary reason for this is readability. If you write something or some code where you're constantly switching between uppercase, lowercase, camel case, it's can become very, very hard to read very, very quickly. Consistency makes things a lot easier to read. So I think, yeah, consistency is a good, it's a good habit to get into, and it will help the readability of your code. The actual text between tags is, however, obviously. So if you want to specify a specific title, my first page, where you capitalize the first letter of every word, that would be different to specifying a title where between the tags you put my first page all in lowercase. The browser would see and render those two titles differently. So as an example too, so going back to kind of the Cave Johnson Caroline Don't Make Lemonade example we used before, you can have some tags that do manage look and feel properties. This is just an example. You would not actually use these. They completely break the idea that I've been talking about separating content and structure and look and feel. These are really, they've been a part of HTML for historic reasons. So they're still around really just for backwards compatibility, and there's much better ways to provide bold and italicized, or indicate that you want something to be bolded or italicized. But yeah, I just use them as an example. But yes, don't actually use these in your own code. You'll be wanting to use specifically the strong or EM tags. But anyway, so bold and italic are two tags that you might encounter. As I said, probably in older code. Essentially, you surround the text that you want to tag as should be bold or should be italicized, and then the browser knows that when it sees that, when it renders that property should be, or it understands that it belongs to a particular category of text called either bold or italicized, and it should display it as appropriate. So for example, we've got here the text Veni Vidi Vici. We've tagged with both bold and italics. So then that, as you can see, if you were to render that in a browser, you'd get something similar to that, where it's both bolded and italicized. A key thing here is that you have to nest, the nesting order of tags matters. So if I open a bold tag, and then under that bold tag open an italic tag, I have to close the italic tag before I close the bold tag. So this is kind of like if I go back to that SGML example from earlier. If I open this book tag and then I open an author tag, if I close the book tag before I close the author tag, that doesn't really work. Because remember, it's all a hierarchy. So if I close something higher up in the hierarchy before I'm finished with something lower in the hierarchy, that doesn't make sense. It sort of violates the idea that it's all hierarchical and it's a tree. So yeah, you have to remember to close tags in the reverse order in which you open them. Some tags in HTML, so something that will come up when you're learning to code with HTML, browsers sometimes, should you make an error, they will make an assumption as to what you meant and just go with that. This sounds like it's nice, but it can cause horrifically hard to find errors when the browser's making incorrect assumptions. So yeah, sometimes you might get away with not closing a certain tag and the browser will display it correctly. Sometimes, though, some tags actually in HTML don't require a close tag. That's something that you'll just sort of have to, we'll come to as we get to it, but just be aware of the two cases. Firstly, you do have some browsers which will just, if you give it code with a few errors in it, it will make do and display something that seems to be correct, but then that might break later down the chain when you do something else. At other times, be aware that some tags do not need a corresponding close tag. But that's something that I think is easier to, oh, actually here, HR as an example. So a horizontal rule. So HR tells the browser that there should be a horizontal rule, so like a divider for the page. You don't need to say HR, then close HR. The browser will just implicitly put that there. But the example that I gave before, if you don't close the body or HTML tags, most browsers will still do work out. They'll still just render it as normal. So every HTML file is structured as follows. You always have a HTML and close HTML tag. As I said, sometimes the browser will just realize that the close HTML tag should be there. Don't get into that habit. It's bad. Don't make the errors deliberately. You'll always have a head section and you'll always have a body section. So the head section is for metadata, so data about the page. You put on here things like the title of the page. So this isn't actually displayed on the page. This is more like if I were to open Chrome and go to, say, Google. The title of the page is this bit up here. So it's displayed in the tab. So that names the page. You might then see other things, other properties about the page. So you might have things like links to other scripts or files that need to be run. And then everything that's actually displayed on the page goes in the body section, and nothing goes between the two. So every HTML page starts with this structure, HTML tag and closing one. And inside the HTML tag, you have a head and a body. And the head is for metadata, data about the page. Anything that displays on the page does not go in the head, it goes in the body. And the body is for the stuff that you actually see on the page. So you can see the hierarchical organization there. The head and the body both come underneath the HTML tag. So yeah, I think I've sort of gone through this before, but so markup language describes about how document parts fit together. One type of tag that you'll see very, very often is the heading tag. So this is something where you would see a tag that actually appears on a page, or a heading that actually appears on a page. You use here H1, H2, H3, so the H tags. Essentially, the number here, the lower the number, the larger the heading. So a H1 is like the top level heading, H2 second level heading, H3 third level heading. So you can see an example here, top level heading Pope, under that a smaller level heading Cardinal, under that smaller level Archbishop. And you can have up to 8 levels. So this is a simple HTML page example here, where we've got a HTML file. So we've got a title, HTML example as a heading, and then a paragraph. The following is an example of HTML markup codes. So I might we've got like 2 minutes left. Do people want to see me show how this actually works in a browser, or would they rather? Okay, I'm seeing a few nods. Okay, so let's very quickly, we'll open up a text editor. So in this case, we'll just use Notepad, and I'll copy this over very, very quickly. So let's, also just so you can see what I'm doing, let's increase the font size. That looks big enough. So you'll notice that I'm putting indents in as well. So under HTML, I'm indenting everything by a space. That is not required. That's purely for readability. It's a nice habit to get into when you start a new tag, to indent everything that goes under that. Just so you can see at a glance, with this, say, body tag, you can see where it ends. For head and body, that's not such a big issue. For other tags where, let's say, you might have 10 different section tags, it's nice to have this indentation because then you can see immediately from the indentation levels where the tag that you've just opened finishes and where the next one begins. So in the head, we'll put a title, the exception being things like title, where you can just chuck everything on one line. And we'll have a H1 tag. And then we'll have a P tag. P is for paragraph, by the way. Okay, so now we will save this. We'll save that on the desktop as hello world. And we'll change .text to HTML. So we'll get out of that. Start the annotations. And then what we'll do is we'll open up Chrome and we'll copy and paste this in here. So now we can see this is our HTML. So that's the way our browser renders this HTML file that we've put here. So we can see here we've got a heading. The HTML example has not been placed on the page, but it's been put up in the title. Then we've got the heading, and then we've got a paragraph. Okay, so we're now right on 5.2, so we'll have to call it there. I'll get your tutors to walk you through, if you would like it, some simple examples in tomorrow's lab, but you'll get a chance to play with HTML there. Anyway, thank you very much, guys, and I'll see some of you tomorrow and some of you next week.